Here in the studio by two men who are both former leaders of their parties. Labour's Ed Miliband, who called for a Commons vote on the terms of any Brexit deal, and Iain Duncan Smith, former Conservative Party leader and a leading figure in the successful vote Leave campaign. The referendum has decided we're going to leave Europe. That seems to be agreed. What is Parliament's formal role in the terms of that departure?
Well, I think, of course, the government is bound to come back to Parliament and to tell Parliament what it's doing, how that's working, and that will happen over a period of time. I would certainly insist that the government does that. But the second part of it, which is the government was not expected to do, if you remember, during the conference, Theresa May announced out that they're actually also, in parallel, going to repeal the 1972 European Communities Act. Now, strictly speaking, according to Article 50, you don't need to do this, but it is bound by our own constitutional requirements. And so that means everything that will be discussed in the Article 50 process will be in Parliament, in detail, going through both houses of Parliament. So this will be the focus for Parliament to discuss every aspect, including things like entry and staying into the single market if they wish in there. So that Parliament's views will be considered and taken throughout that. I encourage that, and I asked for that in this pamphlet I wrote.
Satisfied?
Not really. Look, this is a matter for the national interest, really. I accept that there was a vote to leave the European Union, and I think we should honour that mandate. And I think we should get away from the idea that somehow people who are worried about this are seeking to reverse the result. But there's clearly a wide spectrum of what Brexit looks like, and there is no mandate, either from the Conservative Party manifesto of 2015 or the referendum, for the type of Brexit we have. So it seems to me unarguable, and actually in the national interest and building the national consensus the government say they want, to have Parliament consulted and indeed approve the terms of the negotiations. And I am worried that there'll be a drive to hard Brexit, pushed by some people in the government, and I'm sure some people in government are worried about that, without Parliament having a role. And then it'll be a fait accompli at the end of the negotiations.
Well, what's your response to that?
Well, first of all, I don't believe in hard or soft Brexit. I think the truth is...
hard Brexit is not an issue for you?
Well, no, I don't soft or either hard. I mean, the truth is, what the government has to do in Article 50, there are two processes running in Article 50. The first is a very functional process of how do you leave the organisation, do you tidy up issues on home affairs, bits and pieces that you may wish to be part of. The second aspect is what kind of relationship does the EU have with the UK after you leave the European Union? And you want that one to run in parallel, and you want that to be established as quickly as possible. Now, the key point about all of that...
But all this is going to be done without referring to Parliament?
Well, no, I think the truth is all of this will come back into Parliament endlessly in the course of issues.
I see, so Parliament will get a vote on the single market, for example?
Yeah, because inside the 72 Act, the repeal of that are all the provisions to be members of the single market.
Let's check about this.
So hang on, this is going to be a very long...
I know Iain said to me before he came on...
Is that going to cover what you need?
I fear it isn't. I mean, Iain said beforehand he doesn't speak for the government. But look, if you're saying, Iain, that we are going to get a vote on the single market and whether we're members of the single market, I mean, that's good news. That is definitely a step forward.
Well, that is a major news event. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're saying?
You have been in Parliament as long as I have. You know that if you repeal an act like the 72 European Communities Act, which has everything that we are bound to under European law,
and you'll accept
and all of those regulations are in there, all those votes are there.
And you'll accept that the issue of the single market
all of that will be debated
and voted upon by MPs.
But that's what the 72 Act says. And there's one other element, which, by the way, the Labour Party could, any day they like, they can hold an opposition day debate on membership of the single European market. They could do it. They're doing it on Wednesday, I gather. They can do it again and again and again.
You've got nothing to worry about.
And you can have a vote on it, too.
You know that opposition days aren't the same as government coming to Parliament. But there's
if you defeat the government...
But there's pressure on your side not to vote
for an opposition. But if you defeat the government...
Iain, let me ask you
Come on, I've rebelled in the past.
I've put a bit of pressure on him, Ed. Let's just ask you a question. Are you actually clear on what Labour's position on the single market,
I don't speak for the front bench, but let me tell you what my position is. My position is that we should do everything we can to stay in the single market, and we should also, if we can, seek adjustments to freedom of movement. Now,
is that okay with you?
Now, some people say that's impossible. I think that would be the ideal outcome. Okay. At the moment, the government's position is we've got a target on immigration which we're going to meet, which is unrealistic and will do damage to our economy. And never mind what happens to the single market. Never mind what happens to the economy. That's why you've got a coalition of Labour MPs, Tory MPs, the CBI, who I don't always agree with, Japanese investors, all these people saying, we are really worried by this charge to hard Brexit. The question I want to ask Iain, if I may, is this.
Well, I thought I
Iain,
was going to ask this question.
you understand the need to bring the country together, Remainers and Leavers.
Yeah.
I accept the result. I accept there was a vote for Brexit. But without the government properly consulting Parliament, properly laying the trade-offs before people, I don't see how you get that national consensus, that unity of the country that we need.
Look, the public voted quite clearly and on this to leave the European Union. Now, okay, one of the key areas was to take back control of their borders. Now, I happen to believe that the best way to do that is to have a permit system that allows you to bear down on low-skilled workers, but to allow utter flexibility for high-end, high-skilled workers. Now, if that's in place, we will not be able to remain members of the Single European Act. Hang on, Mrs. Merkel has said so. The European Commission
what about the trade-offs, Iain? What does that mean for our economy?
Hang on, can I just finish?
Yeah,
You
sure.
ask me a question.
Yeah, sure.
The key element of this is not about being in an internal market of the EU. The question is, we want to leave and have full access to that, and so do they to us. And this is really the point. We want to have a free trade relationship
That's
with
what you
them.
want to have.
Yeah, and they do too. And I believe this is the point about discussion. When you get down to it, it's about access, free trade.
Can I bring out the difference between us, John?
I think we can see the differences. They're pretty clear. But I do want to ask you about the pound. The pound is almost at parity with the euro. It's heading for parity with the dollar. Are you excited by that? Is that exactly what you wanted?
I actually think the pound was way overvalued before. If you talk to the CBI, one of the great
So you wanted it down at this level?
CBI wanted it down.
You wanted it down at this level?
And look what's happened to manufacturing as a result.
I wonder why the CBI then want us to return to something in terms of agreeing to a single market.
Well, the CBI asked for a lower pound, and they've got it. And we're now 12% more competitive in the European Union than we were before.
And
the
the
Germans
goods that we're bringing in are more expensive.
And yeah, but hang on a second. There is no inflationary pressure at the moment. The Bank of England has said so. We have massive levels of money floating around. This is a very good time for us to be able to use that lower pound to improve our exports.
Are you
That's what's
equally
happening at the
excited
moment.
by the pound?
I'm not, because we're poorer as a result.
We're not poorer, Ed.
Well, of course we're poorer. People going on holiday will find that they're poorer and we're poorer
Can I
as a
just say to
country.
you, Ed, you and others have all said that the great guardian of this will be, how do you measure this? You measure it by what happens to the FTSE 100, the FTSE 250.
I've never said that.
Yeah, they have. And they all said this is the thing, and it has risen to levels
but let me-
higher
Okay,
than
I'm going to ask you two final
Business
questions. So they're
confidence is
about
very
people
high.
in the Commons. I want to ask you first about the second-rate lawyer that you described the Shadow Attorney
neat,
General as
Legal
being.
advice, actually.
Yeah, well, as it happens, he's the Shadow Brexit Secretary. And as it happens, he was the Director of Public Prosecutions, and he was probably the star lawyer of his generation. Who are you, a non-lawyer, to describe him as a second-rate lawyer?
I talked about the second-rate legal advice, and I stand by that. The reality...
No, you called him a second-rate lawyer.
The second-rate advice is very simple.
Did you or did you
Hang on,
not
John.
call him a
The
second-rate
advice
lawyer?
is about whether Parliament has the right to vote and whether they can declare
the
they have
record
right
will
to vote.
show that you
And that is
called
very
him
where
a
it is.
second-rate
And I'm
lawyer.
not rallying from it.
And
I
the
absolutely
question
believe
I want to
this is
ask
bad
you
advice.
is, do you have confidence of Jeremy Corbyn
Yes.
and his leadership in this specific matter of Europe?
Yes.
We don't really know where he stands on it.
Well, I think Keir Starmer, who I think has made an excellent start as Shadow Brexit Secretary, set that out on television
I saw no nods
yesterday.
from Mr Corbyn.
You saw no what?
I watched
beg your
him
pardon?
carefully. I saw no nods.
I think that is criminology of the most extreme kind, John, when we have big questions to discuss about the future of our economy and our place in the world.
Ed Miliband on that note, and Iain Duncan Smith, thank you both very warmly for coming in.